Picture this. A duke is going blind. But what if the darkness isn't a disease? What if it's a weapon? What would you do if the person who swore to protect you was quietly poisoning you instead? And why would a duchess, elegant, untouchable, indomitable, risk everything just to slip a little powder into his tea? But here's the question no one is asking. What if the duke isn't blind at all? What if every stumble, every trembling hand is part of a trap? Because tonight, one whisper from a maid could shatter an entire title. And when the truth finally spills, who will fall first? The Duchess, or the man she tried to destroy? Before we begin, hit subscribe for more addictive period dramas like this video if you love twisted betrayals, and share it with a friend who lives for shocking reveals. Now, let me tell you what really happened when the Duke lifted that teacup. The morning arrived the way it always did at Blackmere House, not with sunlight, but with a slow, silvery pressure that pressed against the windows and seeped beneath the doors. Fog clung to the estate like a secret that refused to be spoken aloud. In the corridors, the air tasted faintly of coal smoke and wax polish, and the silence held itself with the discipline of old money, broken only by the soft, deliberate whisper of silk as the servants moved like shadows trained not to exist. Duke Victor Halstead did not fear many things. He had faced chambers full of men who smiled while sharpening knives behind their words. He had watched fortunes collapse with the same calm he used to sign death warrants in the form of legal documents. He had built his name into something that made others lower their voices. Yet lately, something had begun to disobey him. It started as a flicker, a candle flame that refused to stay still, turning into a smeared ribbon of light. A portrait in the East Gallery whose eyes seemed to drift from their painted sockets when he looked too long. The lines of ink on an important letter blurring as though the paper itself had decided to hide its meaning. At first, he blamed fatigue. Then he blamed the weather. Then he blamed everyone else, because that was easier than admitting the truth taking shape behind his own eyes. But truth was patient, and it arrived again today. In the breakfast room, the fire crackled with confident warmth. The scent of black tea rose in gentle coils, layered with bergamot and something subtler beneath, an almond bitter note, almost sweet, almost wrong. Victor stood near the tall window, watching the gardens become a watercolor of grey. When he tried to focus on the ironwork of the gate, the world refused him. The wrought patterns softened, edges dissolving into mist, as if the fog outside had slipped into his skull. A step sounded behind him, unhurried, precise. Rose entered without asking permission, as though the house itself belonged to her heartbeat. She wore a gown the color of deep wine, the fabric catching the firelight with every movement. And the air shifted as her perfume arrived first, roses bruised between fingers, with a cool, sharp undercurrent like mint over steel. She carried herself like a challenge that dared the world to contradict her. "My lord," she said. And the title sounded less like respect and more like a blade turned sideways. Victor turned toward her, keeping his posture perfect, his face carved into its usual winter. He measured her by scent, by the small changes in the room's temperature when she approached, by the faint music of her jewelry. He had learned long ago that Rose did not soften for anyone. She did not plead. She did not flutter. She watched, and when she spoke, she struck. "You're awake early," he said, "and you're standing as though you're waiting for someone to catch you," she replied. Her eyes, dark and bright, took him apart with a calm cruelty. "Is it the letters again? The ones you pretend to read with such devotion?" Victor's jaw tightened. "What are you implying?" Rose's smile was slow, almost lazy, as if she had all the time in the world to ruin him. "I'm implying that the great Duke Victor Halstead is losing something, and men like you do not lose things quietly." A servant placed the tray on the table. Porcelain, silver, a small pot of tea that steamed like a promise. Rose moved closer, her silk brushing the air, her presence sharpening the room. She poured with a steady hand. One elegant tilt, the liquid dark as midnight sliding into the cup. The spoon chimed softly against the rim. Once, twice. A delicate sound, a deliberate one. Victor watched the cup, or tried to. The surface shimmered, then blurred, as if his gaze could no longer hold it still. He hated how easily that weakness could be mistaken for surrender. Rose set the cup before him. "Drink," she said, and it was not a request. He lifted it. The warmth pressed into his palm. The scent rose again, bergamot, smoke, and that faint sweetness that did not belong. Rose leaned in just enough for her words to reach only him. "If darkness is coming for you," she murmured, "I wonder what you'll become when you can't see who's smiling." Victor's throat worked once. Then he brought the cup to his lips, and in the doorway, unseen by either of them, a young maid paused, eyes fixed on Rose's gloved hand, on the subtle dust that had vanished too quickly to be sugar. By noon, the fog had thinned outdoors, yet it seemed to have settled more densely inside Duke Victor's head, curling behind his eyes with quiet insistence. He moved through Blackmere House as if through a familiar dream that had begun to lose its edges. The portraits along the gallery watched him with blurred certainty. The gilded frames gleamed, then softened, as though the gold were dissolving into the air. He did not speak of it. He did not permit the word. Men like Victor Halstead survived by refusing weakness, the dignity of a name. In Parliament, he was winter. In his own halls, he was law. Yet lately, the simplest things betrayed him. The sharp line of a staircase, the neat print of correspondence, the quick movement of a servant crossing a corridor. All of it slipped away at the moment he tried to command it. Rose noticed. Of course she did. She seemed to live for the smallest fractures in others, the invisible cracks where power leaked out. When she entered a room, conversation rearranged itself around her like iron filings drawn to a magnet. She possessed that rare cruelty of a woman who never needed to raise her voice. Her calm could humiliate more thoroughly than a scream. At tea, she took her place with the serenity of a queen who had already won. The table was laid with clean linen and silver that caught the light in thin, sharp flashes. The air smelled of bergamot and warm porcelain, and beneath it lingered that faint sweetness again, something like crushed almonds, something that did not belong in a respectable pot. Rose poured with a practiced elegance. Her gloves were pale, her fingers steady, and the tea flowed dark and smooth, almost beautiful. She spoke idly of social invitations and distant cousins, of dresses ordered from London and the petty scandal of a baronet's indiscretion. The words were harmless, the cadence was not. Each sentence felt measured, as though she were counting time. Victor listened more than he looked. He learned her by sound, the soft click of her ring against the teacup, the subtle pause before she answered, the barely there exhale when his hand drifted too close to the pot. He hated that he had to listen this way. He hated that the world was forcing him into a lesser posture. "Your physician came again," Rose said, stirring once. The spoon kissed the porcelain, delicate, bright. "He seems to think rest will cure you." Victor held his own cup without drinking. Heat seeped into his palm. "And what do you think?" Rose's smile arrived slowly, like a curtain being drawn back. "I think men are most honest when they're afraid." Her gaze pinned him with effortless precision. "Tell me, Victor, are you frightened?" He could have lied. He had lied for sport, for strategy, for survival. Yet something about her made lies feel childish, as if she could taste them on his tongue before he spoke. Rose had always been indomitable, never pleading, never bending. She challenged the world because she believed the world owed her an apology. "I am not frightened," he said, and the words came out colder than intended. "How noble," she murmured. "How exhausting." Victor's vision wavered as she leaned closer, her perfume sharpened, roses pressed hard enough to bruise. She watched him as if he were a page she was turning. For a heartbeat, her gaze flicked down, too fast, too practiced, toward the rim of his cup. Then she said, softly, "Drink." The command carried a strange intimacy, the kind that belonged in a marriage only if love had curdled into ownership. Victor lifted the cup. The scent rose again, sweet and wrong. He held it near his lips, and Rose's attention narrowed, keen as a blade. Across the room, a maid approached to clear a plate. Young, careful, nearly invisible, trained to exist without being noticed, yet her eyes caught on Rose's hand. On the precise moment her fingers brushed the pot's lid, on the faint dust that clung where no dust should. The maid slowed. Her breath seemed to stop. Victor drank, and the tea slid warm down his throat, pleasant for a heartbeat, until the bitterness bloomed behind it, and the room shifted slightly, as if the floor had become a gentle sea. Rose watched him over the rim of her own cup, calm as a storm contained in glass. And the maid, trembling with sudden understanding, realized this was not a sickness taking the Duke. It was a choice someone was making for him. The house kept its secrets the way it kept its silver, polished, locked away, and guarded by rules no one dared question aloud. Yet secrets always found the warmest places to breathe. And at Blackmere House, warmth lived in the kitchens, where ovens sighed, kettles sang, and the air carried the honest sense of yeast, onion, and smoke. Eliza stood near the scullery door with her hands tucked tight into her apron, as if fabric could hold her steady. Her heart beat too loudly for such a disciplined world. She could still see it, Lady Rose's gloved fingers, the quick tilt of the lid, the pale dust falling like a blessing gone sour. She had served tea 100 times. She had sweetened cups, warmed trays, memorized the rituals that made the aristocracy feel immortal. But that powder had not been sugar. Around her, the other servants moved with practiced indifference. A cook chopped herbs with ruthless rhythm. A footman polished a tray until it reflected his worried eyes. They talked in fragments, never full sentences, never names spoken too clearly, as though language itself might betray them. 3 girls in 2 years, murmured Mrs. Hargreaves, the housekeeper, without looking up from her ledger. The scratch of her pen sounded like a warning. Dismissed for clumsiness, sent away for insolence. One of them took ill. Eliza swallowed. Took ill how? Mrs. Hargreaves's mouth tightened. In the way that leaves questions behind and answers buried. Best not to collect either, if you value your place. Eliza did not answer. Her throat was dry, and the kitchen heat did nothing to soften the chill lodged under her ribs. She had always been good at being invisible. It was a talent forced into the poor, to pass through grand rooms without disturbing the air, to hear without reacting, to notice without being noticed. But noticing could be deadly. She waited until the noise shifted, until the cook stepped away, until the footman carried the tray out, until even the rats seemed to hold their breath. Then Eliza slipped toward the pantry where the tea caddies were kept, and she did what she had never dared before. She opened the tin meant for the Duke. The leaves inside looked ordinary, dark curls, fragrant, expensive. Yet when she inhaled, that faint sweetness lurked beneath again, thin as a lie. Her fingers trembled as she touched the rim. Nothing visible, nothing that would condemn anyone. That was the genius of it. How clean it could look while ruining a man one sip at a time. A floorboard sighed behind her. Eliza froze so completely she felt carved. "Put it back," came a voice, low and flat. She turned. Mrs. Hargreaves stood in the doorway, eyes narrowed, not cruel, not kind, simply hardened by years of surviving other people's storms. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The kitchen seemed to dim around the silence, as if the house itself leaned closer. "I saw something," Eliza whispered. Mrs. Hargreaves took one careful step forward. Seeing is not the same as proving, and proving is not the same as living through what follows. Eliza! Another voice called from the hall, a crisp, sweet sound that made the blood drain from her face. Lady Rose's laughter drifted in behind it, light as champagne, sharp as shattered glass. Mrs. Hargreaves moved with sudden speed, closing the pantry door between Eliza and the sound. "If you've decided to be brave," she murmured, "be brave in the right direction." Eliza's nails bit into her palms. "The Duke is changing. He can't read the letters. He stares through people. He—" "Stop," Mrs. Hargreaves said, and for the first time, fear cracked her composure. "If you speak that in the wrong ear, you'll be gone before nightfall." Eliza's chest tightened. Gone. The word carried weight in this house. Gone was not always a carriage to another position. Gone was silence. Gone was the cold edge of the lake at dawn. Gone was an empty bed no one asked about. Lady Rose's footsteps passed the kitchen door, silk whispering like a secret rehearsed. Her perfume, bruised roses, mint over steel, slipped in through the cracks as if the house had surrendered to her. Eliza's hands stopped shaking. She thought of the Duke's cup, the way his fingers had tightened, the way his throat had worked as the bitterness rose. She thought of power being stolen in teaspoons, and she realized something else, sharp and undeniable. If Rose could poison a Duke, then no one in this house was too small to be sacrificed. Eliza stepped out of the pantry and walked toward the corridor. Each footfall a decision she could not undo, her breath tasting of smoke and fear and something like resolve. She did not know if Duke Victor Halstead would listen. She only knew that if she stayed silent, the fog would keep spreading until it swallowed him whole. Eliza found him in the long corridor outside the music room, where the air always smelled faintly of varnished wood and old sheet music, as if melodies had once lived there and refused to leave. Duke Victor moved slowly, one hand gliding along the wall with restrained precision. His steps were measured, not clumsy, careful in a way that suggested practice rather than helplessness. Eliza's voice came out smaller than she intended. "My lord." He stopped. For a moment, the silence between them felt heavy enough to bruise. When he turned his head, his gaze did not quite settle on her face. It hovered near it, as though he were searching for sound instead of sight. "Yes," he said, and the word was ice made polite. Eliza forced the truth past her fear. You're not blind, not naturally. Your wife is—" Her throat tightened, the sentence trying to die in her mouth. "She's putting something in your tea." The corridor seemed to narrow. Even the distant hush of servants faded, as if the house itself had decided to listen. Victor's expression did not change. Only his fingers on the wall stilled, the smallest pause, too controlled to be surprise, too sharp to be nothing. "That is a grave accusation," he murmured, "and grave things have consequences." "I saw it," Eliza said, breath trembling. "A powder, pale, not sugar, not spice." She tipped it in as if she'd done it 100 times. A soft sound floated behind Eliza, silk dragging over stone. Rose's voice followed, smooth as warmed honey, cold as the knife inside it. "Have you now?" Eliza turned so fast her stomach lurched. Rose stood at the far end of the corridor, framed by the muted light, her posture perfect, her gloved hands resting together as though she were attending a recital rather than an execution. Her perfume arrived first. Bruised roses, sharp green stems, something metallic beneath. Victor's hand returned to the wall, his head angling slightly downward, the posture of a man losing ground. "Rose," he said, carefully, as if tasting the name. Rose walked toward them with unhurried grace. Each step was a quiet statement. She belonged here. She owned the air. She could turn fear into routine. When she stopped beside Eliza, she tilted her head and studied the maid the way a jeweler assessed a flawed stone. "You've been here how long?" Rose asked. Eliza's mouth opened, but no sound came. Rose smiled faintly. and the smile did not reach her eyes. "Long enough to learn the rules," Rose continued. "Short enough to forget them." Her gaze flicked to Victor, and something sharpened in it. "And you, my lord, listening to kitchen whispers now, how far the mighty fall?" Victor's voice remained steady, subdued, almost weary. "The house is full of whispers. I cannot see who carries them." Rose's hand lifted, slow and deliberate. Her fingertips brushed Victor's cheek with a tenderness that felt rehearsed. Eliza watched the Duke's jaw tighten under that touch, a muscle jumping once as though restraint had bitten him. Rose leaned closer to Victor, her lips near his ear. "Drink your tea," she murmured, intimate enough to sound like devotion, "and stop letting insects crawl into your thoughts." Then her attention returned to Eliza, and the softness vanished. "If you ever speak my name with that kind of certainty again," Rose said quietly, "you will leave this house without a reference, without wages, without a voice anyone believes." Eliza's pulse pounded. She wanted to bow, to apologize, to disappear. Instead, something stubborn rose in her, something that had no business existing in a maid. "And if I'm right," she whispered, "what then?" Rose's smile widened, pleased in a way that was almost affectionate. "Then you'll learn," she said, "that being right does not protect you." Victor's head lifted a fraction, as though he were listening to more than words, listening to the spaces between them. Rose adjusted his collar, a possessive little gesture, and her glove grazed the inside of his wrist. Under the silk, Eliza saw it, a faint dusting of pale residue along Rose's seam, as if the powder had kissed her glove and refused to let go. And Victor, still facing into his manufactured darkness, spoke softly enough that only Eliza heard. "Tell me," he said, "exactly what you saw and exactly where she keeps it." Night settled over Blackmere House with a damp, patient weight, the kind that turned every corridor into a throat that could swallow a scream. In Duke Victor's chamber, the fire gave off a steady crackle, and the scent of wood smoke clung to the velvet curtains like an old confession. Eliza stood near the door, hands folded so tightly her knuckles ached, listening to the slow pulse of the estate, distant footsteps, the groan of settling beams, the faint rattle of wind at the panes. Victor sat in the high-back chair, his face turned toward the hearth as though he could see the flames. His eyes, when they lifted, looked unfocused, pale winter glass with no clear direction. He let the illusion breathe. He let the weakness exist in the room, because weakness was bait, and bait drew monsters closer. "Speak," he said at last. Eliza stepped forward, the floorboards murmuring beneath her shoes. "She keeps it on her," she whispered. "In her glove seam, sometimes, or in a little silver case, small enough to hide in her sleeve. She tips the lid like it's nothing, like she's seasoning your life." Victor's mouth tightened, not with shock, but with something colder, confirmation. He reached for the decanter at his side, poured a measure of brandy he did not drink, and held it for a moment, as if weighing the world inside it. "How long have you noticed?" he asked. "Only today," Eliza admitted. "But others, they've said things. Girls sent away. Illness. Accidents." Victor's fingers tapped once against the armrest, controlled, restrained. "Accidents are convenient," he murmured, "especially when they happen to people no one bothers to remember." Eliza's throat tightened. "My lord, if you confront her—" "I won't," he said, cutting her off so cleanly the word felt like a door slamming. Then, after a beat, he added, softer, "Not yet." Eliza frowned despite herself. "Then what will you do?" Victor leaned back, and for a heartbeat, the mask slipped. Not fully, not carelessly, but enough to reveal the shape of the man beneath. His gaze sharpened, settling with sudden precision in her direction. The change was so stark, Eliza's breath caught, as if the air itself had been stolen. "I will let her believe she's winning," he said. Eliza stared. You can see. Victor's expression did not soften, but something dangerous warmed behind his calm, like embers under snow. Not always, he answered. Enough. And enough is a weapon. He stood, moving without the searching hand, without the hesitation. The room seemed to adjust around him, as though it had forgotten what a duke looked like when he refused to pretend. He crossed to the desk, opened a drawer, and withdrew a small leather-bound book. Records, names, dates, evidence, the kind that ended lives in respectable ways. She thinks she's turning my world dark, he said, so I will give her darkness. I will stumble when she expects it. I will reach for walls when she watches. I will drink when she offers. And I will make my body betray me on schedule. Eliza's skin prickled. But the powder, I won't swallow enough to fall, Victor replied. And when she isn't looking, you will replace my cup, every time. Do you understand? Eliza nodded, fear and purpose tangling inside her. Yes, my lord. Victor's jaw flexed, a hard line under candlelight. Good, because if she wants to poison a duke, she is not doing it for sport. She is doing it for control, and control means there is a reason. He paused, voice lowering to something almost intimate. I intend to learn whose reason it is. A faint sound drifted from the corridor outside. Silk, slow footsteps, unhurried as confidence. Victor's face turned back into winter. His eyes softened into the vacant stare of the blind. He angled his posture just so, leaning lightly as if fatigue had claimed him. Eliza felt the hairs rise on her arms. Rose was near, and Victor, wearing helplessness like a crown, whispered without moving his lips, "Now we begin." The invitations had been sent weeks ago, embossed and cruelly confident, as if paper could command the weather. Yet the night of the Halstead ball arrived wrapped in mist so thick it seemed the sky had lowered itself to eavesdrop. Carriages rolled up the drive with wheels hissing over damp gravel, and laughter spilled out in bright, brittle bursts. People announcing happiness the way they announce status, with volume and polish. Inside Blackmere House, heat and perfume fought the cold. Beeswax and crushed flowers, brandy and powder, wool dampened by fog and the sharp, clean bite of starched linen. The air carried too many secrets for one evening, layered like fabric, silk over velvet, sweetness over steel. Rose moved through it all as if she had invented this world. She wore pale stones at her throat that caught light like frozen water, and her gown whispered with every step, soft, relentless, refusing to be ignored. She offered smiles the way one offered a gloved hand, beautifully, without warmth. Indomitable, unapologetic, she did not shrink to fit the room. She made the room shift to accommodate her. Victor entered at her side with measured restraint, his cane tapping lightly, his gaze distant, his mouth carved into calm. The great Duke, made fragile by fate, so the guests would think. Sympathy hovered near him like an eager parasite. Men softened their voices. Women tilted their heads, eyes shining with the hungry pity reserved for powerful things beginning to break. Rose fed that pity with elegant cruelty. She guided him as though he were an ornament she owned, steering him into conversations, letting him pause in just the right places, allowing his silence to be interpreted as suffering. When someone murmured, "How dreadful," Rose answered with a serene smile. "It is dreadful," she agreed, as if the word meant something pleasant. Victor listened to everything. The rustle of gowns, the click of cufflinks, the soft scrape of shoes on polished floor. He measured distance by echoes and breath, by the way voices shifted when Rose moved closer, by the way the room tightened around her confidence. He felt her presence like a hand on the back of his neck, guiding, controlling, savoring. They danced because society demanded it. Rose's hand rested on his shoulder with perfect lightness, yet her fingers pressed just enough to remind him who held the reins in public. Her other hand lay in his, cool through gloves, her pulse calm as a woman who did not fear consequences. "You're quiet," she murmured, close enough for her perfume to blur thought. Roses bruised, a clean green edge, and something metallic that promised pain. Is it because you can't see their faces? Or because you finally understand what it feels like to be at someone's mercy? Victor's jaw flexed. He kept his voice low, controlled. "Do you want mercy from me?" Rose's laugh was soft, delighted. "No," she said. "I want the truth, and you've always hoarded it like coin." He stepped when she stepped, turned when she turned, playing the role of a man learning his own limits. Yet once, only once, his grip tightened at her waist, firm enough to make her breath hitch, and for a heartbeat the mask of helplessness slipped into something else, something precise, something awake. Rose stilled. Her gaze sharpened, not frightened, but thrilled, as if she had been waiting for proof that the lion still had teeth. Around them, conversation swelled again, unaware of the quiet war being waged in inches. A footman passed with a tray of porcelain cups, steam rising in delicate curls. The scent of tea threaded through the heavier perfumes, bright at first, then sweet, faintly almond, faintly wrong. Rose's hand lifted, graceful as a benediction, and she took a cup herself. She turned back to Victor, her smile serene enough to fool saints. "Drink," she whispered, placing it into his hand like a vow. Victor raised it slowly, letting the room watch his trembling fingers, letting pity bloom in the faces he pretended not to see. Rose watched closest of all, her eyes glittering with patience. And somewhere behind the music, Eliza felt the night narrow to a single question. How many sips would it take before the Duke stopped pretending, before the Duchess stopped smiling, before the fog finally claimed its prize? Victor's fingers closed around the porcelain as though it were merely warm, merely harmless, merely another ritual meant to soothe the fragile. The cup sat light in his hand, yet it carried a weight no china deserved. Steam curled upward, scented with bergamot, clean, respectable, and beneath it, that whisper of sweetness again, thin as a lie and twice as persistent. Rose watched him over the rim of her own cup, unblinking. In the crowded room, voices rose and fell like tides. Flattery, envy, laughter sharpened into gossip. Yet Victor heard only the precise spaces between sounds, the pause before a remark, the swallowed breath after a compliment, the way people leaned closer when they believed weakness had finally entered the Duke's bones. He let them believe it. He let his shoulders droop by a fraction. He let his grip tremble exactly once, as if the world were slipping away and he were too proud to admit he could not hold it. Rose's smile barely shifted. She was indomitable, even in gentleness, even in deception, even in marriage. She did not plead for his trust. She demanded his submission with the calm certainty of a woman who had never been denied. "Drink," she murmured again, soft enough to feel like a private vow. Victor lifted the cup. The heat kissed his lips. He took a sip, small, measured, controlled, just enough for the room to see him obey, just enough for Rose to taste victory in the air. The tea slid down his throat with familiar comfort for a heartbeat. Then the bitterness unfurled behind it, blooming slowly, expertly, as if the poison had manners. The floor did not tilt yet, but something inside him softened, a faint loosening at the edges of thought, a gentle blur, a persuading darkness. It was not the violent strike of arsenic. It was worse. It was patience. It was erosion. He swallowed and let his lashes lower as though exhaustion had claimed him. He let his mouth part as if he were struggling for breath. He even let his hand tighten around the cup, knuckles whitening, as though he were losing control of his own strength. Rose stepped closer, close enough that her perfume pressed into him, bruised roses, green bite, the cold hint of metal. Her gloved fingertips brushed the back of his hand, a touch that looked tender to strangers and felt like possession to him. There, she whispered. Good. Victor's pulse kept steady by force of will. He set the cup down with care, as though he feared dropping it. His head angled slightly, listening, always listening. Then he heard it, the smallest sound of all. A second cup being lifted. A single swallow, so quick it almost hid itself. Rose drank too, but only a fraction, only a token gesture meant to disarm suspicion. Yet the sound was wrong. It was the sound of certainty, of someone who knew exactly how much danger lived in a single mouthful. Victor's mind sharpened through the haze. Antidote, tolerance, preparation. She was not gambling. She was executing. Across the room, Eliza stood very still, hands folded, face pale beneath the warmth and lights. Her eyes were fixed not on Victor, but on Rose's wrist, where the lace cuff shifted with movement. For a fleeting instant, Victor caught the faintest glint, metal hidden under fabric, a tiny clasp, a concealed case. Rose turned her head toward Eliza, as if she had felt the maid stare like a pin against skin. Her expression did not change, but the air around her grew colder. Victor let his chin drop, pretending the tea had conquered him. He let his shoulders sink, a man collapsing gracefully. And in that manufactured weakness, he made a decision as sharp as a blade drawn from velvet. He would not fight her in plain sight. He would follow her. Because a woman who poisons her husband does not do it alone. Not in a world built on alliances and quiet power. There would be a source, a supplier, a reason that lived outside the walls of Blackmere House. Rose's hand slid to his arm, steadying him for the audience. "You should rest," she said, and her voice carried the sweetness of devotion. Victor gave her what she wanted, a slow nod, a shallow breath, the illusion of surrender. And as the music swelled and the guests turned their pity elsewhere, Victor listened to Rose's footsteps, silk over polished floor, tracking the direction she would take when she believed no eyes could see her at all. Rose left the ballroom the way a blade leaves a sheath, silent, certain, and already pointed at something unseen. Victor followed at a distance, wearing his weakness like a tailored coat, letting his cane tap too softly, letting his steps hesitate just enough to appear harmless. The corridors beyond the music were cooler, carrying the damp breath of fog that had slipped inside, mingling with the fading perfume of crushed petals and warm bodies. She moved as though the house itself parted for her. Servants lowered their eyes. Doors opened before she reached them. In that obedience, Victor heard a truth he had ignored for too long. Rose did not merely live at Blackmere. She ruled it. Her footsteps led him down a side passage and out into the night air that smelled of wet stone and distant smoke. The fog here was thicker, tasting faintly metallic, clinging to skin like a warning. Rose's carriage waited where shadows pooled. She spoke to the driver without turning her head, and the wheels began to roll, swallowed almost immediately by the mist. Victor signaled Eliza with the smallest motion of his fingers. They did not chase. They followed. The town lay below the estate like a different kind of world. Narrow streets, soot-dark brick, lamps glowing weakly through the fog as if ashamed of their own light. The air grew sharper with each turn. Coal, damp wool, stale ale, and the bitter sting of chemicals that did not belong to respectable noses. Rose's carriage stopped near a modest shopfront tucked between a cobbler and a closed chapel. There was nothing grand about it. That was the point. Grand places were watched. Small places were ignored. Rose stepped inside without hesitation. Victor waited until the door closed behind her, then approached with Eliza close enough to breathe, but far enough to remain a shadow. The sign above the shop swayed slightly in the wind, its lettering faded, the windows clouded with years of steam and secrecy. Inside, the scent struck immediately, dried herbs, camphor, vinegar, and something sweet that turned the stomach the way false kindness did. Behind the counter stood a man with careful hands and frightened eyes. the kind of man who sold remedies to the poor and poisons to the rich without asking which was which. Rose's voice was low, controlled, too calm for an innocent purchase. "I need more," she said. The apothecary's fingers tightened around a small tin. "My lady, the last amount—" "You will not question me," Rose replied, and the softness of her tone made it worse. "You will take payment, and you will remember nothing." The apothecary hesitated. Rose tilted her head, indomitable even in stillness, and Victor felt the moment sharpen. She was not pleading. She was deciding whether the man in front of her was worth sparing. Then Victor stepped forward, letting his cane scrape the floor. The apothecary's face drained of colour. "Your Grace," he stammered, eyes darting to Victor's unfocused stare, to the rigid set of his shoulders. I didn't know." Rose did not flinch. She turned slowly, and her gaze found Victor with immediate clarity, as if she could see through his act by instinct alone. For a heartbeat, the fog outside seemed to press against the glass, eager to hear. "How devoted," she murmured. "Following your own wife." Victor's mouth stayed cold. "What is in the tin?" Rose's smile curved, elegant and lethal. "Something to help you rest," she said. "You've been so tired lately." The apothecary swallowed. His eyes flicked to Rose, then away, like a man deciding which monster would hurt him less. Victor heard it in the man's breath. Fear of Rose was older than fear of a duke. And then Rose lifted her gloved hand toward Victor's face, almost tender, almost intimate, until her fingers paused at his cheekbone, the lightest touch that felt like a threat dressed as affection. "Be careful," she whispered, so softly only he could hear. "If you keep pretending to be blind, you may miss what's standing right in front of you." Blackmere House held its breath for the dinner Victor announced the following evening, as though the walls themselves understood the difference between celebration and sentence. The table was set with ruthless elegance, white linen drawn tight, silver aligned like soldiers, crystal waiting to catch light and turn it into glittering evidence. The air carried roast and wine, beeswax and winter, and beneath it all, that faint, treacherous sweetness that had tried to rewrite Victor's senses. They arrived in pairs and polished clusters, men with careful smiles, women with eyes sharpened by boredom and ambition. A discreet magistrate took his place as if he were merely another guest. A physician sat with his hands folded, face calm, yet his gaze moved like a cautious animal. Conversation attempted to bloom, but it kept wilting under something heavier than etiquette. Rose entered last. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. She wore black velvet that drank the candlelight, and at her throat, a pale stone gleamed like a frozen tear. Indomitable as ever, she carried herself with the serene authority of a woman who believed the world existed to accommodate her choices. Her smile touched the room as though granting permission for everyone else to breathe. Victor stood when she approached, cane in hand, eyes softened into their practiced vacancy. He offered his arm. Rose accepted it with a grace that looked affectionate to those who wanted to believe in love, and looked like ownership to anyone brave enough to see. "My darling," she murmured, close enough for her perfume to sting. Bruised roses and something cold beneath. A dinner with witnesses. How thoughtful. Victor's mouth did not move much when he replied, "We are a respectable house." Rose's gaze lingered on his face, measuring, searching for fractures. "Yes," she said softly, "respectable." The meal began. Courses arrived like chapters. Laughter tried to return, thin and obedient, but it kept catching in throats. Victor said little. He listened. He waited. He watched without appearing to watch. When the final course was cleared, he spoke at last. "Tea," he said. A servant stepped forward with the pot. Victor's hand lifted slightly. One small motion, almost nothing. Eliza, stationed behind the sideboard, moved with careful precision, switching cups as they had planned. her fingers steady despite the tremor in her chest. Rose noticed the tray, her attention sharpened like a drawn blade. Still, she smiled and reached for the pot herself, as if to reclaim the ritual as her right. "How devoted you are," she said, and poured. The tea streamed dark into Victor's cup. The scent rose, bergamot, warmth, and that whisper of sweetness beneath. Rose handed it to him with a calm that dared the room to doubt her. Victor held the cup. Let the silence settle. Let every eye turn to his trembling hand. Then he looked up, truly looked. His gaze snapped into focus with the clean cruelty of truth. The vacant softness was gone. The room seemed to tilt, not from poison, but from realization. The great Duke Victor Halstead was not drifting into darkness. He had been waiting in it. Rose's smile faltered for the first time, a tiny crack in perfect porcelain. Victor set the cup down without spilling a drop. "Lady Rose," he said, voice low, steady, lethal. "Tell them what you have been putting in my tea." A murmur rippled through the guests. The physician's posture tightened. The magistrate's eyes narrowed. Rose recovered quickly, too quickly. Indomitable even when cornered, she lifted her chin. "My husband is unwell," she said with velvet sweetness, "and unwell men imagine enemies." Victor's hand slid across the table. A small silver tin appeared near his fingertips, placed there as if by fate itself. "Do they imagine this as well?" he asked. Rose's gaze flicked to the tin, then back to him, her composure hardening into something colder than calm. "Careful," she whispered, barely moving her lips. "You are playing with stories that can ruin you." Victor leaned in just enough for the firelight to catch the edge of his eyes. "I am the story," he replied. "And tonight, you are the scandal." Rose's breath caught, small, furious, before she smiled again, sharp and bright, like a woman reaching for her last weapon. "Then you should ask," she said softly, "who taught me to do it?" Silence did not fall at Blackmere's table. It thickened. It became a living thing, pressing against throats and forcing every breath to sound like confession. Candlelight trembled in the crystal, turning wine into rubies and faces into masks. Somewhere beyond the windows, the fog leaned closer, patient as fate. Rose sat very still, as though stillness were sovereignty. Her hands rested lightly beside her plate, gloved fingers calm, chin lifted, eyes bright with a defiant, elegant contempt, indomitable even now. Especially now, she did not beg. She did not collapse into tears to be forgiven. She simply watched Victor with the cold poise of a woman who would rather be ruined than seen as weak. Victor stood at the head of the table, the cane set aside like a discarded lie. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Power did not shout. It decided. "You heard her," he said to the magistrate, the physician, the guests whose curiosity had dressed itself as concern. "She admits intent, and she claims instruction." A murmur tried to stir, but Rose cut through it with a soft laugh that tasted of steel. "Instruction," she repeated, savoring the word. "As if I were a foolish girl who stumbled into wickedness." Victor's gaze held her, steady, merciless, and for one brief heartbeat. Wounded, the crack was small, almost invisible, the way ice fractures before it breaks. Only Rose would have noticed it, because Rose had spent their marriage searching for the places he hid warmth. "Tell me," Victor said, and the question came out like a verdict. "Who?" Rose's smile widened, sharp and brilliant. "No," she replied simply. "If I name them, I die in a way that won't make headlines. If I don't, I may live long enough to be remembered." The physician shifted, uneasy. The magistrate's pen hovered. Guests stared as though witnessing a rare animal choosing teeth over escape. Victor's fingers curled once, then relaxed. Control, always control. You won't be remembered for cleverness, he said quietly. You'll be remembered for trying to blind a duke. Rose leaned forward a fraction, and the velvet of her sleeve whispered against the linen. And you, she murmured, will be remembered for marrying the wrong woman. The words landed with a private cruelty. For a moment, Victor's composure threatened to falter, not because he feared scandal, but because some part of him had once wanted to believe she was more than strategy wrapped in beauty. That part of him recoiled now, as if touched by flame. He inhaled slowly, the scent of tea still lingering like a ghost. You will not leave this house tonight as my wife, he said. You will leave as Lady Rose, stripped of my name and every shield it ever offered you. The guests exhaled like a single creature. Rose's eyes flashed, anger, triumph, grief, all braided together too tightly to separate. Still, she did not plead. You can exile me, she said, voice soft as silk, but you cannot erase what I taught you. Victor stepped closer, the candlelight catching the hard line of his jaw. You taught me the cost of mercy, he answered. Then, lower, only for her. And you taught me that I should have seen you sooner. Rose's throat moved once, a betraying swallow. She masked it with a smile that looked like victory and tasted like poison. As servants moved to open doors and summon carriages, Rose rose with composed grace, as if leaving were merely another entrance. She paused beside Victor, close enough for her perfume to press into him one last time. Bruised roses and cold metal, and she whispered, almost tenderly, You think you won? Victor did not look away. I know what you tried to do. Rose's smile tilted, faintly pained, faintly proud. And you will never forget, she said, because you finally learned how darkness is made. Victor's voice was steady, but something inside it burned. And you, he murmured, will never forget that I kept my eyes open,